Well, hey, everybody. It's good to see everybody. Thank you. It's such a short notice for joining us. We have certainly over 1,000. I think we're going to approach 2 or 3,000 people live on this event. It's being live streamed on a whole bunch of different platforms, by the way. So it's great to be with you. It's kind of a unique thing. So what we want to do is just bring everybody together. You guys are so important, not just to this movement, but to the future of democracy, which is what this movement is all about. So I'm really excited by the speakers we have today, our guests, and most importantly, by all of you for being willing to just, stand up and put it all on the line and get out there and say that democracy matters. We're a movement that I started after January 6th. As some of you have probably heard me say before, I assumed that after January 6th, everything would people would wake up and we'd get back to doing things how we should, disagreeing the right way, and all those kinds of discussions. But what we've noticed over the last couple of years, particularly with this movement, is just the outpouring of not just support, but the outpouring of people that say to me, look, I just want a place where I can actually go disagree with people and we can have those like grown-up conversations. So we're in a big battle right now, and it's not a battle. Yeah, there's be money spent in this race. There's words said. There's all these kinds of things we all know are going on. But I think we're fighting against fear. We're fighting against division. One of the most basic human instincts is to survive. And if somebody convinces you that your very survival is at stake with every election, that if the other side wins, your survival is in question, it's a very motivating thing. It's very destructive too. What we do in Country First is we try to bring hope and optimism to people. We try to show people the right way to do this. So let me give you a couple things. First off, we have a hashtag for tonight. That hashtag is Vote for Democracy. So vote the number 4 democracy. If you're tweeting, tweet that out right now. Would certainly encourage you to do that, to keep that going. And so we'll continue to put that out, get that information, and get people to turn out to vote, get that excitement going. This is a battle. It's funny because every 2 years people say this is the election that matters the most, and I think it actually continually is increasingly the election that matters the most. And I'd love to get to a point where it wouldn't be that democracy's on the line. What you'll see tonight in these speakers are people that have put their activity and their action where their mouth is. They don't just go out and say nice words about democracy, but they work hard for it. Some people actually physically have defended democracy. Some people do it with their action and their time, and I know that's what all of you do as well. And so again, I just want to say thank you for being here. I want to encourage everybody again to use vote the number 4 democracy. And let's have a good time. So our guest tonight, I want to just let you know, first off, you'll be hearing from Officer Michael Fanone, who you guys all know well. He has great tattoos, probably better than any tattooed person I know. We have actress and activist Alyssa Milano, who you all know, and I'm very honored to have her join us as well. An astronaut and shuttle pilot, Colonel Terry Virts. I gotta tell you, this guy makes me jealous because he's been to space. And not many people can say that. And sadly, I'll probably never be able to say that as well. So for our first speaker, I just want to tell you guys a very brief story, a personal story. So, I was sitting in my office when January 6th was unfolding, and certainly moments of fear. There were moments where I wondered if I would have to, defend myself lethally, frankly, in my own office, which is something I never imagined we would have to do. By the way, I encourage you all to poke into the chat there and let us know where you're from and anything else. But so as I'm sitting in that office dealing with it, we made it through that day. One of the most emotional moments for me was not going onto the House floor, because I didn't go on the House floor after that looking at the majesty of democracy. I was actually really angry. I was angry at what went down. But when I was leaving, it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And we had spent the whole day, where's the guard, all that kind of stuff. And as a guardsman myself, I leave and I'm driving out of the parking garage, and I see basically a platoon of National Guardsmen. And that actually got me pretty teary-eyed, because you realize we have to, first off, I'm proud of the Guard, but secondly, we should never have to have the National Guard here. The DC Metro Police Department A lot of times people mix up the Capitol Police, DC Metro PD. If the DC Metro Police Department had not shown up on January 6th, we'd have seen a lot worse of a situation. And they showed up just at the right time. One of those people is, as you all know, Officer Michael Fanone, who woke up and basically self-deployed to the Capitol. It means he didn't have to go, but he went because he knew how important this was. He's become a personal friend of mine and somebody that I actually lean on myself as we deal with some of the emotions of January 6th. We've both been kicked out of our respective tribes, and he's been just a fantastic friend. He also has a new book, and let me encourage you all to get that book, whether it's on Audible, whether you get the actual hard copy. It's called Hold the Line, and it's a really great synopsis of what happened that day and some pretty amazing kind of, I think, insights that Officer Fanone brings. So look, also quick January 6th update. As you all know, we're beginning the process of writing our report, but we're not done investigating. So there's a lot of work still to do. I hope you have learned a lot from these hearings. The point of these hearings is not just to, I don't know, show interesting things. It's to tell the American people, it's in your hands now. You have the torch. What are you going to do with it? Keeping your oath matters. And one of the people that kept his oath that day, and I'm very proud to call a friend, I'll now call up Michael Fanone. Mike, take it away, my man. Okay, tech people, what do we got here? All right, in the meantime, there we go. Hey, what's up?
What's going on, buddy? Thank you so much for having me on.
Good to see you, man. Of course.
Yeah, listen, I really appreciate the opportunity to address this group. You know, Adam and I have become incredibly good friends after January 6th. And I think it's so important to participate in this event, which, you know, in this group poignantly named Country First, which I think couldn't summarize the next midterm and also presidential election any better. Americans need to place their country first. That being said, for those of you who don't know, my name is Michael Fanone. I'm formerly a DC Metropolitan Police Officer. I began my law enforcement career immediately after 9/11. Like many other Americans, I felt the call to serve. I started with the United States Capitol Police, and after about a year, I lateraled over to the more traditional law enforcement agency here in the District of Columbia, the DC Metropolitan Police Department, where I worked for 2 decades, mainly in units that focused on violent crime and narcotics trafficking. On January 6th, I heard the distress calls coming from my colleagues on Capitol Hill, and like hundreds of other DC police officers, I self-deployed. I put on a uniform for the first time in more than a decade, and I responded to the Capitol. When I got there, I encountered some of the most brutal hand-to-hand combat of my entire policing career. There were tens of thousands of loyal Trump supporters who came to the Capitol to prevent Congress from certifying a free and fair election. As a result of my efforts, I sustained a traumatic brain injury. I suffered a heart attack and was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was one of about 150 police officers that was injured that day, some severely. And in addition to that, we lost about 5 officers in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. I'm here because of the importance of the upcoming elections. There are a whole host of issues that are important to me, that I'm passionate about, but none more than democracy and my love for this country. I'm never going to tell anybody how to vote, but I can tell you how I'm voting in the upcoming election. I want candidates that not only support democracy and oppose the subversion of democracy, but those that understand the urgency and the threat that we are currently under from individuals within our country, Americans, and what they pose to our democracy.
Hey, I'm trying to speak, but hang on. Andrew, can you put my video back up? It's saying it's not. There we go. Okay. Am I in? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Hey, Michael, thank you. And it's great to have you. And like I said, one of the things I respect is as we go into this election season and talking about that defense of democracy, you never would expect somebody would actually have to go defend it physically. Yes, overseas maybe, but not here at home. And you did that. And I know the struggles you've been through. And I know, because you and I share a lot. You've been, as you've talked about, somewhat excommunicated from your fellow police officers, right? Who, to your shock and frankly to mine, as I've dealt with it, somehow seem to enjoy putting their political beliefs now before friendship. And could you just talk briefly about that? But the other question I have is, as people are over the next couple of weeks dealing with these votes and talking to people, and just as we go into the holidays, how do you recommend, or what have you kind of sensed, how do you go talk to people about this stuff? What's a good way to, I don't know if you broach it, bring it up, deal with it mentally, anything like that? What's your advice for people?
Well, with regards to law enforcement, I mean, listen, it's concerning. I think there's far too many individuals within law enforcement, military community that, have decided that they want a candidate like Donald Trump, who is willing to win at all costs. And while I understand that way of thinking, especially if you feel underrepresented, that's not how our democracy works. We live in a very diverse country, and that's one of the things that makes this country great. And respecting the fact that other people may have a difference of opinion is really the foundation of what this country is all about. Civil discourse when it comes to our political disagreements or our policy disagreements. That being said, what we're experiencing right now is not civil discourse over policy disagreements. It's violent discourse over two alternate realities. And that's what I guess would segue into your follow-up question, how to broach that with friends and family members that may see things differently. Unfortunately, may not understand or appreciate reality. I mean, listen, I believe in compassion and empathy, and I have friends and family members who are unable to see January 6th or the threat that's posed to our democracy by Donald Trump and his allies for what it is. I look at it in the same way that I would look at an intervention. I believe in tough love. I talk about my experience. I talk about the experiences of so many other officers that day, the reality of what unfolded on January 6th. And I also draw their attention to the findings of the select committee, which you participated in. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for people to understand that, you may have to cut ties with those individuals. There has to be consequences. We're not disagreeing over tax policy. We're talking about reality versus falsehoods. And again, this is good versus evil.
Truly. Well, Officer Fanone, thank you again. Hold the Line is your book. It's gotten some great reviews. You did a really good podcast that I heard on the Bulwark, a live podcast, which was the first time they've ever done that. So I'd encourage people to watch that and to get the book. So thank you for being here, and thank you for defending democracy, both at the rally, the virtual rally, and of course, physically, which unfortunately you had to do. And thanks for being my friend, and I mean that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Andrew?
Hey everyone, welcome to the Country First Get Out the Vote rally. We're so pumped to see y'all here. And we just want to remind all of the folks out there to join the movement, join the conversation, and get on country1st.com and sign up. We'd love to hear from you. We have over 200,000 members right now, and over 6,000 volunteers that are helping to, advance this mission. And what we're really excited to talk to with y'all most about is we actually endorsed over a dozen Democrats, independents, and Republicans all throughout the country. And we call them our defenders of democracy. We need to know as Americans that when we go to sleep at night, that our leaders, they're not going to use the power of their offices to overturn elections, regardless of who the winner is. And we saw the ultra MAGA movement trying to win state legislatures or trying to elect state secretaries that are going to advance their agenda, regardless of who the duly winner is. And we can't stand for that. So if you go to country1st.com/endorsed, you'll see that we have endorsed, again, so many different folks. Here at the US Congress, we've seen that Senator Lisa Murkowski, even though she was entering an election year, that she was willing to vote to convict the former president, proving that she's willing to put country before party. We also have a few folks that are out there spreading the Country First mission and talking about the importance of a new coalition, that regardless of if you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent, that you're an American before anything else. We've also endorsed governors and folks for state legislatures. These folks are out there, again, making sure that in 2022 and 2024 and 2026, that our elections are going to be secure. But again, whoever wins them is exactly who gets those electoral votes. And of course, secretaries of state. We've seen how democracy has been put to the test with our secretaries of state having to reject the former president's lies and not just find missing votes. So we're proud to endorse these secretaries of state, and we really encourage you to get out the vote and vote for them. Regardless of if you see a candidate from your state or not, please make sure to take a look and you're filling out your ballot. Are there folks that are willing to defend democracy? We know our defenders of democracy are, and there are a lot of other great candidates out there. So please make sure to take a look. And we actually have one of our defenders of democracy here tonight. His name is Evan McMullin. He is running for senator in Utah. And so I'm going to throw it over to Evan. Please welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, Congressman Kinzinger. I really appreciate your having me here and all the work you're doing at Country First. And thank you to all of you who are a part of this important movement. I couldn't be more honored to be one of the endorsed candidates and to be with you tonight. If we're going to save American democracy, it truly is going to take a new coalition of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. None of those groups have the votes to save American democracy on their own. And in fact, every generation or two, there are new groups, new coalitions, new political alignments that happen to solve major problems facing the country and to preserve liberty and justice for all in America, and hopefully to help us march forward and more perfectly realize our founding ideals, those in the Declaration of Independence. In Utah, I'm running against someone who tried to overturn our democracy by finding fake electors in 2020. And that's Senator Mike Lee, who calls himself a constitutional conservative and loves to wave his pocket constitution in the air. But when the barbarians were at the gate, he was happy to abandon the Constitution for his own pursuit of power and for that of his allies, especially in the White House. And so here we're building a cross-partisan coalition in Utah to replace him, to hold him accountable, and to chart a better way forward, to stand up to the broken politics of division and extremism that put Officer Fanone and Congressman Kinzinger's lives at risk. We can stand up to that kind of division and extremism and help the country solve the major challenges that it's facing. I served for over a decade in the CIA, and most of that time was after 9/11, and I was undercover in the Middle East and South Asia, running counterterrorism operations. And I served with Americans of all different backgrounds, men, women, different racial backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different religions or no religion, immigrants and people who were born natively in America. We were a motley crews, but we were asked to do very important work to track down those responsible for 9/11 and those who were trying to plan and carry out other attacks, and to make sure they could never do it again. And I have to tell you, when I did that work, there was never a time, not a single moment, when before we went out on a counterterrorism operation or whatever it was that we were doing at the moment, never once did we stop before we went out and sort of say to each other, before we do this, I've got to know, what party are you a member of? Or who did you vote for in the last election? It never, ever happened. For us, it was enough to know that we were committed to our core ideals, that we're created free and equal, and therefore we have a system of self-government set forth by the Constitution, a democratic republic in which we select our leaders and they remain accountable to us. And when we vote them out of office, they go, and they go peacefully. We were united around those things, and we knew we had to stand together in order to defend them. And the rest of the country was fairly united at that time too. If you can think back to where you were on 9/11 in the year or two that followed, we were united as Americans because we knew we had to stand together to face a real threat. Well, by the time I finished my service and came back to America, we were a very divided country. And now I believe, unfortunately, that we're more divided than we've been since the Civil War. I believe, as Lincoln did, that it's important that we remain committed to our core ideals, our core values, those in the Declaration of Independence. And if we stray from them, then our country becomes divided and weakened. And that's what's happening now. So I'm running to help this country, our country, recommit to those core ideals, to protect ourselves from enemies from within and without who would like to tear down our system of self-government. Too many people are giving up on democracy in America because they think a strong man would be better able to solve problems. But I've served in countries controlled by dictators and authoritarians, and I'm here to tell you, they don't solve problems for people. They're in it to enrich and empower themselves at the expense of people, not in their service. And so, though democracy is a messy process, though there are many changes and reforms we need to make to ours, it is worth defending because we cannot overcome any major challenges we face, whether it's inflation or an exploding national debt, high healthcare costs, environmental issues. We can't overcome any of those things unless we have a democracy. And so we've got to stand together as Republicans, Democrats, and independents to defend it. And that's why I'm so excited about the work of Congressman Kinzinger and Country First in general. You're playing a critical role in this mission. And we need to grow this coalition as large as we can in order to protect our democracy. So thank you so much for being a part of it. And if you're inclined to be involved in our campaign here in Utah, you can learn more at evanmcmullin.com. Thank you very much.
Hey, Evan, thank you. And for those that don't know, Evan and I are actually old friends back when he used to be a Hill staffer. And I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that, he'll be a senator soon and I'll be out of office. So I got to still continue to try to, see how I can maintain some kind of sense of superiority over him, but it won't happen. Just kidding. Look, and everybody, I tell you, this is a unique moment and can really send a strong message. And I'm going to ask Evan about that in a second. But Republicans, independents, and Democrats literally doing what we've talked about, creating the uncomfortable alliance to defend democracy, because that's important. That's the moment we're in. I wish we weren't. That is the moment we're in. It would be great to be able to have the luxury to once again simply disagree on policy. So Evan, I was there last week. We had a great time together. We had a democracy forum that we had, I think, 100 or 200 people waiting in line for hours before just to get in. Unfortunately, there were hundreds that couldn't even get a seat, had to unfortunately go home because even the overfill rooms were full. What that shows me is there's a lot of energy here. There's a lot of energy with your campaign. So I'd encourage people to look more into it to help out. But let me ask you, so you're going to DC, hopefully, as an independent senator. It's a razor close Senate right now, a razor close House of Representatives. how is it that you as an independent in the Senate can make a huge difference? What is that unique thing that can bring? And what do you think is good for that for our country?
Yeah, well, as you point out, both chambers are very closely divided, and we don't know what's going to happen in this cycle exactly, but I think no matter what happens, both chambers will still be pretty closely divided, and the Senate is as divided as it can be now, 50-50, with the vice president casting the deciding vote. So I think it'll still be very divided, and we've seen in the Senate that those who are willing to act with greater independence in the chamber have become the most influential members of the Senate, and I would say some of the most influential people in Washington. And that's an opportunity that we have in building this coalition of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. I myself am running as an independent so that I can better represent this coalition, and not one party or the other, but bring people together as Americans to protect our democracy and solve problems. And so I'll work with Republicans and Democrats to get things done. And this coalition of ours in Utah has been growing. We're in a neck and neck race with Senator Lee, and we have a real opportunity to win it, because I think this message that country first and that you, Adam, are carrying, that we have to come together to protect our democracy and solve problems, is really what people are calling for and demanding out there. People are fed up. I mean, when we're so divided, we can't lower inflation. We can't lower healthcare costs. We can't solve major challenges. We're in a huge drought out here in the West. We're not going to overcome, huge environmental challenges and live up to our responsibility of stewardship for the environment if we don't have a democracy. It just won't work. And so we have to come together to do it. And being an independent between the two parties, with the support of this coalition, will give us one of the most important votes in the Senate. And we can use that to drive solutions on these issues and to strengthen our democracy, because we've got to make certain reforms to shore up the foundation of our system of self-government before the next time we're facing people who want to tear it down. Now's the time to strengthen it.
Well, thank you. And I think your candidacy, win or lose, and of course we hope for a win, has been game changing in terms of how people see this, how they see strategy. Thank you for that. One last quick question. Does carrying around a pocket constitution mean that you're going to automatically defend the Constitution?
Apparently it does not, I mean, it does not, it's incredible. My opponent, Senator Lee, does carry around this pocket constitution, calls himself a constitutional conservative, but he betrayed the Constitution. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I believe I took, as a young CIA officer, I swore an oath to the Constitution. I'm sure of course you did too, as a member of the military. And when Senator Lee became a senator, he swore an oath to defend the Constitution. But at the moment when his power was challenged and that of his allies, he was willing to throw it all away. It's just an incredible betrayal of the Constitution, yes, but of the whole American idea. I mean, I think about 14 generations of Americans who have sacrificed for our freedoms in America, and he was willing to throw it all away in the pursuit of power, and we've got to draw the line there. So thank you very much, Congressman Kinzinger, Andrew, and all of you for being a part of this important movement. I know that we can make a great difference and do a great thing for our country here, but we have to be together.
Well, thank you, Evan. Appreciate having you here. And again, everybody look him up and support if you can. I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Definitely. Well, we're so excited. Tonight's going very well. Again, if you want to learn about our defenders of democracy, just like Evan, go to country1st.com/endorsed. You do not need to be a Republican or Democrat or independent to support someone who defends our democracy. So when you're hitting the ballot box in less than 2 weeks on November 8th, think about who supports our democracy and how can we make sure that we can get back to maybe having the privilege of disagreeing on policy again, so that we don't have to think every time we hit the ballot that our democracy is hanging in balance. So with that, we're excited to get y'all involved. Sign up to volunteer for people like Evan. And with that, Congressman, we'll throw it back to you.
Well, thanks, Andrew, and everybody. Look, we are, again, a major battle. And, politicians, unfortunately, recently, it's this weird trend where politicians like to tell you how powerful they are. Used to, wield power humbly. But the new thing is just to brag about power that you have or don't have. And I think don't have, because truthfully, the power in this democracy, in this country, lies with the voter. That's not just a line. Some people will say that line and not mean it. It truly is. And at a moment when we're looking at such division, it's movements like this, but I think really going to be the movement of country first, that as it builds makes a difference. Over 200,000 members, over 6,000 active volunteers. We played in a lot of races and won and made big differences. This will continue to grow. One of the people that I have a lot of respect for is somebody that has taken her position and her, I'll say fame, and people knowing who she is, and not just rested on it. She's passionate about what she believes. She's passionate about this country. She's passionate about democracy. And one of the things I deeply respect about our next speaker, Alyssa Milano, is the fact that she and I don't agree on everything. In fact, to be honest with you, probably if you take the over 1,000 people on this call or in streaming, I doubt there are 2 people anywhere in that group that agree on everything. But we both have become friends because there's a lot of respect for where we come from, what our goals are, and what we're focused on. So with that, I'm proud, happy, and excited to introduce my friend, Alyssa Milano.
Thank you so much, Congressman. What can I say? Thank you for inviting me to join you here. And thank you for just all the work you do, and all the panelists, the work that all of you are doing to protect democracy. I was struck at the beginning of this webinar or Zoominar when you said that we were fighting against fear, right? And Officer Fanone said that he believes in tough love, right? And when I was a little girl, my mother said something to me that stayed with me my entire life, and I try to base every single decision that I've made as an adult on this one thing that she said to me, which was fear and love cannot live in the same house. And I'm choosing love, and that's why I'm here. Love for my country. And I think people are genuinely surprised when I team up with Republicans. And I think it's sad, but I think it's a sign of the times that we live in. Working across ideological divides used to be seen as something that was normal and important. It was the way the work of the American people was done. And now I feel that it is seen by members of both parties as a betrayal. And as Adam said, I don't agree with all of his positions. I know he does not agree with all of my positions. And I think that that's true for each of us regarding some of the candidates that Country First has named, in the 2022 Defenders of Democracy. But each of these candidates, I think, has proven that when the most powerful forces in our country try to tear down our democracy, they will stand up and fight. They'll say, if you want to destroy our country, you have to come through me first. And that is the most important thing to me. That goes beyond party. It goes beyond, any philosophical disagreements that we may have. And that's what patriotism looks like, right? No matter what party you support, it is vital, it is essential that we have a worthy opposition with whom we can disagree in good faith. In good faith. And we need to know that agree or disagree, the people who are in office will protect us, will protect our country. And that's, why I'm here tonight, standing with you, my Republican friend in support of all of the defenders of democracy. And I hope that everyone watching tonight will join us, not only, in this mission, but also in being more open to dialogue for the sake of democracy, and the health of not only the country, but the people in our country.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. It's interesting. You said at the beginning, you can choose fear, you can choose love, you can choose hate, you can choose hope. But everybody has that choice to make every day. And, the darkness in I personally believe everybody in your heart, every day you're fighting kind of a battle of light and dark, right? You can acquiesce to the darkness or you can let your heart be filled by light. We don't win that battle every day. And I think it's harder to do it because fear, anger, division is really motivating. And to have somebody, come on like you and just be willing to say, look, democracy is what matters. We need a lot more of that in this country. And we're seeing that grow. We're seeing it build. Let me just ask you a brief question, because you touched on you hit what I wanted to ask you very well. But once again, if you could give somebody just a little bit of advice about putting some of those partisan stripes aside for the defense of democracy, what would you say? And I'm not talking, if there's issues that are huge, right? We're not saying everybody puts aside their partisan stripes. We all have opinions and we should. That's frankly what we want to get back to debating. But just the defense of democracy, the idea that your vote counts and you should have the opportunity to vote. What kind of brief advice do you have to give to people about just like how to reconcile that?
Well, it's interesting because you before, and I wrote it down, you called it an uncomfortable alliance. And I would say it's not only uncomfortable, but it's a necessary alliance at this point. And these conversations are not easy, especially now when everything is so divided and we're all living in the silos of the algorithms of social media. So we're not exposed to other positions. We're not exposed to, just human decency in the same way that we used to. It's not about humanity anymore. And this is all, this is why I met with Senator Cruz on gun violence prevention, and why I've been working with Senator Murkowski, who I know Country First has endorsed, on getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed, so that there are protections against gender discrimination in the Constitution. This is not about party life. This is not about this is not about my ideology. And if we could get outside of ourselves, this is about protecting people. And I've always said that voting is about protecting people. It's about protecting the people that you love. It's about protecting your neighbors. It's about protecting sometimes lifestyles that you might not agree with. It's about protecting people to make their own decisions. And it's about we have to get things done for the American people. Too many people are struggling, and we need to get things done. And that means working together so people can live happy and healthy lives, free of any kind of oppression. And if we don't come together for candidates who actually protect democracy, we won't have a democracy to protect, and thus we can't protect the American people. And that's, again, what this needs to all be about. And this is not hyperbole. This is truly, an existential crisis for our country. And if people who are willing and able to ignore the votes of the people and the protections of the Constitution, if those people assume power, our votes will never mean anything ever again.
Well, Alyssa, thank you so much. And, it's interesting. I, as many of you know, I'm very passionate about Ukraine, and watching people stand together to defend democracy physically at the cost of their lives. It's a sad but a good reminder to us of how valuable this thing that we have is, this self-governance. It's really hard, but it's
Really
really
hard.
valuable.
And
It
I just
is.
want to take
And,
a moment to recognize the women in Iran who are also facing
yes,
protests every day and risking their lives to advance human rights for women, which is the cause that I am most passionate about in my life. We are very blessed in so many ways, but it can all go away, and we need to be aware of that. And we all need to come together to do everything we can to protect each other.
well, Alyssa, thank you for putting your activism to work. Thank you for using your celebrity for good, for what you believe in. Particularly, thank you for being here today. And I think, again, on Ukraine, it's funny. The old joke is if you put two Ukrainians in a room, they'll create three political parties. But what we've seen is that they can take their divisions and come together to defend democracy. We don't have to do that physically yet. Hopefully, we never get to that point. But thank you for following through. So God bless you. Thank you for being here.
God bless you.
We appreciate you. Thank you. You know, the next, our next and last speaker, I've just gotten to know fairly recently, and I'm very jealous of him because, as I mentioned, he went to space. He's a cool dude because he's from the Air Force. So he obviously knows how to make wise decisions and wise choices. But what I'm more excited about is he has a real passion for this country, not just, you know, from a defense perspective or from a space perspective. He has a passion for people, and I've gotten to know that well. And before he speaks, I want to just point out he does have an Instagram. He does social media really well, actually. So go to his Instagram is Astro _ Terry or Astra. And I need my glasses. My goodness, I'm getting old. Astro, isn't it? Yeah, it's Astro. And then at Astro Terry is Twitter, and he has a really good podcast. It's the Down to Earth podcast with Terry Virts. So, Colonel, thank you for being here today. We had a great lunch the other day, and please take it away.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks again for lunch. I appreciate it. And by the way, I've got my I voted sticker on today. So that was, I had to do that because I'm going to be out of town next week, but excited about the election and hopefully it comes out right. But I'm a former Air Force pilot, like Adam is right now in the Guard. I was a F-16 pilot and test pilot. Then I went to NASA to be an astronaut. And while I was there at NASA, I had the privilege of flying on the Space Shuttle Endeavour on a 2-week mission. We actually finished building the space station. We finished the assembly complete of the ISS. And then a little over 4 years later, I went back up, that time on a Russian Soyuz, which was kind of cool because we launched on the same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin had launched from back in the day, the first human in space. And that was a 200-day mission. So I ended up spending a little over 7 months in space. And I could go on and on for hours about different stories. I've written a few books and movies, but one thing really stands out. I remember it was on my 5th day in space on my first flight. We were flying over the Mediterranean at night and we came over the Middle East. It was like Israel and Jordan and Lebanon and Syria right next to each other. And Egypt was right there and Turkey was right there. And like everything was right next to each other. And my first thought was, guys, what's the problem, man? You guys are all right there, right next to each other. And then the thought hit me that, you know, when I fly over this during the day, I don't notice people, but at nighttime, that's when you notice that there's humans on this planet. And you notice it because of city lights. And so as I flew around the Earth, I started to realize that there's a lot of city lights in America. There's a lot of city lights in Europe. In Saudi Arabia, there's lots of lights and not very many people. But in places like Africa, there's 1 billion people and hardly any lights. And the most striking one was North Korea. I showed Adam this picture the other day. We both flew airplanes there to help defend South Korea. South Korea is this beautiful, bright, vibrant country, and North Korea is just a black hole. There's a little white dot where Pyongyang, same number of people on both sides of the border. And the thing that hit me was I was seeing politics from space. And that was a profound thought. I'd never thought I was going to see that. I never heard any other astronauts talk about that. But you can really see how people set up their systems of government. And when you look at the planet from space, when you look at the galaxy, it is overpoweringly beautiful. I helped make an IMAX movie called A Beautiful Planet, and that is very well named. It really is a beautiful planet. But you see it from this, I call it a cosmic perspective, that, man, it's been around for a long time. It's going to be around for a lot longer. And the people that think they're important down here on the planet are just really not that significant. So it's really hard to be impressed by, the celebrities or whatever, having seen the planet from space. And there's a few politicians in our country that think very highly of themselves. And when you look at the universe, they're just not that big of a deal. But for the last 5, almost 6 years now that I left NASA, I've been doing a lot of speaking. I've been to all 7 continents, and I talk about space and all these fun, exciting things, but there's more important things than just that. And I always would end my talks with, man, it feels like 1930 and 1940 is not that far away. Well, man, folks, we are in 1941 now, maybe 1942. We have bypassed the 30s. We were in a shooting war in Europe, which is just unbelievable. And the world's really descended into 2 camps. There's authoritarians like China and Russia and others. And then there's democracies. And when you look at, what's going on with these authoritarians, President Xi just made himself dictator for life. He just gave a big speech. If you actually read what he says, it's absolutely terrifying. When I went to business school and we did a China week, and to read the kinds of things that they were saying are so colonial, like they really plan on taking over the world. They have a 25-year vision and a 100-year vision, and they plan on being number one and dominating everything. And in China, would make Orwell jealous. They're so Orwellian. They track everything. It's a surveillance state. And it's really terrifying to think of what's going on. And when you look at Putin and Xi, they both have something that stands out in common. They kind of overrode their constitution to keep themselves in power. And I kind of can't believe I'm saying that, but we have the same exact thing that happened in America with our American president trying to overthrow an election to keep himself in power, which is why that's so much more important than the price of eggs at the grocery store. The price of eggs is very important. People need to survive, and we need to focus on that in America. But most importantly, we need to make sure we don't go down this Orwellian nightmare that China and Russia and other countries other countries are. And so we got to have our eyes wide open and not kind of head stuck in the stand. I had a good friend of mine who actually told me that he would rather have inflation low than democracy. A very well-educated, close person in my life. I just couldn't believe that he said that, but there's a lot of folks that are feeling that way. So we need to kind of change hearts and minds in our own country. So I'm thankful for organizations like Country First who are doing that very thing. They're trying to bring some sanity back into the system. And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm probably a radical moderate. When I was a teenager, I stuffed envelopes for Ronald Reagan. That party is long gone. We just need a group of people who are going to run the government, because politics matters. One of the things you get to do after you fly in space, you go visit the Hill, you visit representatives, senators. I've been to the Oval Office a bunch of times. I met with different presidents. And one of the messages that I always tell them is, it's not about the rocket science, it's about the political science. Because unless we get that political science right, the rocket science doesn't matter. And I was a math major, and I probably didn't learn that much at the Air Force Academy. But one of the things I learned is there's this thing called a bell curve. And so a bell curve, what that looks like, everything in life can be described by a bell curve. The temperature in October is a bell curve. The batting average of catchers. I'm a big baseball guy. The Astros are going to the World Series. That's a bell curve. Politics is a bell curve. Most people are somewhere in the middle. Most good solutions are somewhere in the middle. But our system that we have set up right now, between gerrymandering, ask Adam Kinzinger about gerrymandering, partisan primaries are absolutely horrendous. We've set up our own, and algorithms. Alyssa was talking about algorithms. We've set up a system that's like self-destructing, and we need to fix that. But that system benefits both ends of the bell curve, not the middle part. So most voters are homeless. They don't have a party to vote for. And that's where, again, organizations like this one and others, hopefully they can help promote candidates that are going to fill in that need that most of us feel for somewhere either to the left or middle or right, but somewhere near the center, not on the crazy ends. And so Congressman Kinzinger asked me to like, what am I looking for when I vote? And I thought of a couple things. I'm looking for someone who will work with people from the other party. You don't have to agree with them. You're not going to vote with them 100% of the time, but you can at least work together and get bills done. I was really surprised when we got a gun bill done. It was very weak. It didn't really do that much, but it did a little bit. And that was amazing that it really was a bipartisan bill. That's something that I think candidates need to have, the ability to work with other people, not just want to own the libs or not just want to demonize all Republicans as death incarnate. So that's an important thing. The other kind of non-negotiable is, do you deny the election? And it's kind of, it's unbelievable. I never thought we'd be here, but the vast majority of Republicans running for Congress, running for Senate, running for statewide offices like governor and secretary of state, the majority of them deny the election. Even though I think if you got them one-on-one, they really, some of them anyway, don't believe it. They're saying they deny the election just to hang on to power, which is treason. That's actually treason if you're doing that and you're a Republican. So that's another non-negotiable. An easy thing to look at if you're not sure who to vote for, just look to see if Trump supported them and endorsed them. And that's a good litmus test for if somebody that you should vote for or not. That bar is so low. We're not talking about intelligence or experience or policies or anything like that. We're just talking about the absolute minimum low bar just to pass the basic democratic litmus test. But that's where we are. So we need to work to make this country stronger. America's brand has gone down. I travel overseas a lot. I talk to a lot of businessmen around the planet, and they don't trust America. They think that the next Trump might come into office. You know, how can they trust us when we sign up for a treaty if the next guy is just going to cancel it? And these issues are really important. So try and keep that cosmic perspective. There's a planet in the solar system out there, anyway, so that's it, Adam. I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, can you guys hear me? For some reason, I'm frozen on the screen.
You're good.
Can we hear you? Okay, cool. All right, good. Hey, Colonel, that's awesome. And I think you had so many things. I could probably talk to you for 30 minutes here. I'm not going to, but again, by the way, your podcast Down to Earth, and it's very, very good. But let me, it's interesting when you're talking about just looking at space or looking at Earth from space. I remember one of my early flights home from DC when I was a congressman. I'm looking out the window. I think we were on approach into Chicago, and it's nighttime, and I look out and I see this big city, right? And I don't remember which city it was, but I'm looking out and I'm like, okay, I'm probably looking at a area that houses maybe 70,000 people out of my window. And I'm like, okay, I represent 700,000 people. So multiply that by 10 and imagine God just with his big hand reaching down and plucking one person out of that. And it's me, right? And I don't say that to be like bragging. That's what it hit me at that moment, the responsibility I have as member of Congress. I can get caught up in the negativity and complain, I think like everybody, but I can do that. But it's been really an honor to do the job. I'm happy to be leaving, but I can't imagine why people would represent 700,000 people or a whole state or whatever the position is and not be compelled to do the right thing. I mean, we all have one life to live. And at the end of that life, we're going to look at the mirror and say, what do we do with that? I can't imagine having spent my life solely focused on achieving power and the kind of, I don't know, maybe lack of peace that would bring, or just complete consternation. I don't even know the right word to put on that. So that reminded me of that. And you also mentioned the thing about Reagan. You said that party's gone. Sadly, I agree with you. And I think whether we create a new party someday or restore, the parties to represent the bell curve, this movement is going to be a huge, significant part of that. That's my vision for this movement. And it's the vision people brought. Let me ask you, just as we're closing, as we're wrapping up, one of the things that's really bothered me about both the kind of MAGA movement and January 6th was how the term patriot has been twisted. And now some people, when you think of patriot, you actually don't think of a patriot. You think of somebody charging the hill of the Capitol, right? Because they perverted that word so much. Let me ask you, as what I believe truly you're a patriot, and I think the people on this call in their own right are patriots by being willing to put the country above anything else. What does patriotism mean to you, and how do we draw more people into this?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it starts with the family, basic and schooling needs to be right at the church, whatever. People need to understand right from wrong. They need to be taught that. But patriotism is putting country first. I hate to be, cheesy about it, but it's true. And honestly, Adam, I think in years gone by, the patriots that I would call out, I'm reading this book called Chesapeake by James Misher. It's a great book. People like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, they were, putting their lives at risk for their fellow countrymen. What you and Liz Cheney have done, what were there 200 and some Republicans in Congress, and there were 10 willing to do what you did. I mean, and that's not risking your life, but God, no one on this call besides, I think, Officer Fanone can understand what it's like to be shunned by their tribe the way you have. And that, I'm guessing that wasn't fun. And you have to, there's some switch in your brain that needs to say, I'm going to do the right thing, even if it is bad for me. That's what they taught me at the Air Force Academy. On day one, you walk in, there's this big, we will not lie, cheat, or steal. And I had all these years of ethics. And it kind of pains me to see some of the military members in Congress that you and I talked about selling their soul. Lindsey Graham at least was honest. He said, look, I just want to be relevant. So he's willing to put principle for power, which is fine. At least he was upfront about it. But now, like you just said this, we have the power. It's called a vote. And so that's the problem with democracy, is you kind of get what you deserve. I think we need an amendment for term limits, but we already have term limits. It's called elections. And so democracy really comes down to us. And if the American people are willing to vote for the price of eggs over democracy, we're going to get what we deserve. And you can see that preview in Beijing and in Moscow right now, or you can see the preview in Mykolaiv and Kherson and Kharkiv is where you can see the preview. So we need to open our eyes up, because I don't mean to be dramatic, and I am very optimistic. You know why I'm optimistic is kids. I did a speech at an F-35 RTU graduation. These 23-year-olds are flying the world's most advanced jet. And by the way, can you please let some of those loose in Ukraine? The war would end very quickly if we could do that. The war would end within weeks if we could do that. These are great kids. They're patriots. They're smart. They're way smarter than I was when I was 23. And so I do have a lot of hope for America. I think America's best days are ahead of it. But if I'm not going to do nothing, I'm not going to just tell my grandkids that I sat around and did nothing. Obviously you're not either. You've done the huge step of serving in Congress, which is like sticking a fork in your eye, I think. But you've done it. You said you're one of 700,000. One night we were in the Russian segment with their cosmonauts eating dinner, and I looked out the window and I was like, you know what, guys, there's over 6 billion people down there. And there's 6 of us. We're literally 1 in a billion. We need to do, I just watched Saving Private Ryan. You need to earn that, right? You need to do something with what you've been given. And the most frustrating thing, 3 of the cosmonauts I flew in space with, I shared this with you, are now in the Duma supporting the war, which it tears me apart. So, some people do great things with what they've been given and some people don't. So thank you, Adam, for what you've done. And this is a lot of work. You don't have to do this. You could just ride off into the sunset of board of directors and whatever else congressmen do. I don't know, but you're not doing that. You're trying to serve your country. So I really appreciate that.
Well, Colonel, thank you. And I'll definitely be the first to sign up for the Virts for President campaign. So, but thank you for your passion and your I think sharing that, even though you're 1 in a billion, I'm only 1 in 700,000. I think it's a fantastic story and it's a fantastic perspective. So I look forward to an even stronger and long-lasting friendship with you. And by the comments I've seen on here, everybody wants to hear more of you. So maybe we'll have you back for a little longer. But thank you. For everybody, listen, this is the end of our program. And what's the most important takeaway here? We had a lot of great speakers, each with their own perspective. the takeaway is your vote matters, voting matters, and whatever you can do to get that message out there, to remind people, to remind yourself. I have to remind myself every day not to get drug into the mud and become part of that, to try to bring optimism, hope, and light, even though I think we should very aggressively engage those that are abusing people, those that are lying to people. Doesn't mean we tolerate those. We don't. And I think we come after those folks with righteous anger while presenting a vision to people that they're desperate for. People are desperate for a vision, and they're desperate to just get, that's what I love about Country First. When we get together, people love the fact that there's people that don't agree with them in it, and they can actually have a respectful conversation, because you can't get that anywhere else. Well, let's take that and make this an infectious disease, but like a good one, of people just being able to talk to each other again. So this has been awesome. This record turnout for any of these events we've done. So thank you. Again, support all our great candidates. Country First is country1st.com. And we thank you for tuning in. We've got the great list of everybody. So again, hop up. We got some good new merchandise too, which is cool. I've got my Country First t-shirt right here. So God bless you all. Have a great day.